listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, we unpack the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. His ex-girlfriend has given more disturbing testimony involving drug-fuelled freak-offs. We're joined by criminal lawyer Jahan Kalantar, who explains what charges Diddy is facing and what's next in this case that involves some of the biggest names in the music industry. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 14th of May. Rowan Dennis won't serve jail time after being sentenced over a car crash that killed his wife, Olympian Melissa Hoskins. Mr. Dennis, who was also a former Olympian, pled guilty to committing an aggravated act likely to cause harm over the crash in 2023. He was given a 2-year suspended sentence and a 5-year driving ban. Melissa's father says the family's turning their attention to the couple's 2 young children.
There's 2 young children caught up in this tragedy who've lost their mum. For them to then go and lose their dad, even though, albeit a temporary loss, I don't think that would be ideal at all.
The AEC has admitted a ballot box filled with votes from the recent federal election went missing in a key Sydney seat. The almost 2,000 ballots were accidentally taken home by a temporary Australian Electoral Commission employee. An investigation has now been launched, but the AEC says the box was sealed as the votes had been counted and it doesn't affect the results. And after more than 30 years behind bars, the Menendez Brothers are now a step closer to freedom after a major legal victory. A judge in LA has reduced their sentence from life without parole to 50 years to life. It means with time served, the brothers who murdered their parents in 1989 are now eligible for parole. A parole board is expected to meet next month to decide if Lyle and Eric will be released. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with criminal lawyer Jahan Kalantar on the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial. His heavily pregnant ex-girlfriend has given powerful testimony of drug-fuelled sex parties, some of which were filmed, and violent bashings. We asked Jahan what charges Diddy is facing and what happens next. And a warning, this following chat could be triggering and contains confronting themes, including explicit sexual detail and alleged abuse. Jahan, thanks so much for joining us. We're unpacking exactly what's going on with this sex trafficking trial involving Sean Diddy Combs. One of the people on the witness stand, one of the first to give testimony, and it's very confronting, a warning to our listeners, is Cassandra Ventura. Can you explain who Cassandra is?
So Cassandra Ventura is P. Diddy's ex-partner. It's someone with whom he had a long-standing relationship. She was the woman who you've probably seen footage of savagely assaulted in the hotel lobby. And one of his long-term partners who is a part of the prosecution case that P. Diddy is involved in cross-border sex trafficking and racketeering.
She is heavily pregnant at the moment, Cassandra. I think it's estimated she's about 8.5 months pregnant, but she's got on the stand with really confronting testimony and a warning to our listeners. The details are really confronting in this. She has gone into detail about these drug-fuelled sexual encounters organised by her then boyfriend, Diddy Combs. Can you unpack exactly what these alleged drug-fuelled sexual encounters are?
So I think what the prosecution is doing quite well is it's painting a picture of what the relationship was like and fundamentally trying to say that Cassandra was not a willing participant in them. So these parties known as freak-offs would involve her having sexual intercourse, often with sex workers, sometimes multiple sex workers. It would involve a large amount of drugs being consumed for extended periods of time. And it was really the color of the testimony. It was the little details, things like apparently he would watch from the corner masturbating while wearing a bandana and a mask to hide his identity, that he insisted that people be glistened up while wearing baby lotion at all times, that she was unfortunately against her will subjected to urination by people on her and by him on her. So it was very hard to listen to. Your heart breaks when you hear it.
Jahan, in regards to what Casandra had revealed in her testimony, is that she also alleges that she had been filmed during some of these so-called freak-off parties and that he would allegedly blackmail her. Can you explain that?
So a lot of the testimony and a lot of the case is built around the fact that essentially P. Diddy, using his status, using his power, and using his wealth, coerced Casandra and other people to engage in these acts which they didn't want to engage in. And he was using this as a means of control. One of the means of control is, if you don't do what I say, I will expose who you are to the world. I will show these videos and I will humiliate you. On the converse, and the defense has made this pretty clear from the start, they're saying that P. Diddy has an unorthodox sexual lifestyle. He's a swinger. And just because a person changes their mind about the level of consent they have after the event doesn't mean they weren't consenting at the relevant time. And that seems to be the question here. Was there genuine and proper consent at the relevant time? Or was this acts of coercion and control that would force anybody to be stuck in a situation which is horrific?
Because it's really important to note here that he is not facing charges of domestic violence or coercive control right now. These are very specific charges. Now, what happens if the prosecution cannot prove these charges are upheld? What happens from here?
There'll probably be a double jeopardy type argument. So you can't be charged for the same offense multiple times. And there's a very real possibility that these charges will, if they're unsuccessful, P. Diddy will move forward and not face criminal sanction. There may be a civil case against him. There may be some other matters that arise, and perhaps another state will bring more and further charges against him. But these are the charges that he stands accused of. And once again, I'm quite surprised that there was no domestic violence charge based on the footage of what happened in the hotel room that the world saw. Once again, the prosecution team, they're not stupid. There must be a specific reason they're doing what they're doing. And if the charges fail, the charges fail.
So, Jahan, in regards to who else is set to take the stand, there are allegations. We all know he is an incredibly powerful, Sean Diddy Combs, a very, very powerful music mogul. There were allegations that he'd actually signed Ventura to a 10-album deal and she only actually released one album. There are allegations that there are a number of other very powerful people within the music business somehow associated with Diddy Combs. So who else is set to give evidence?
A lot of the witnesses are using pseudonyms, so we don't know who they are, understandably to protect themselves from having any consequences or backlash. And what I was hearing, and I'm not sure about this, but it's apparently one of the witnesses whose identity was known to the court and to others has gone AWOL. They don't know where this person is, which is unusual given that the trial is about to start. Now, there may be some nefarious reason, there may be a non-nefarious reason. This may simply be a rumor. But the difficulty in cases like this is often the witnesses understandably are given pseudonyms, and so we don't know who is giving what evidence. It was always going to be the case that Cassie's testimony would loom large and loom at the forefront, given that she is one of the most public people to have accused him. She filed a civil case against him, which I think they settled on relatively favorable terms to her. And there's going to be other witnesses. Who they are, they're often protected by pseudonym.
So we don't know who else at this stage is set to give testimony. Is that correct?
We have some ideas. So there's some background characters that we can assume. You know, police involved in the investigation are probably going to talk at some length about how they investigated, how this becomes a federal charge with cross-border materials in relation to things. You know, for example, the security guard has given evidence of what they witnessed at the domestic violence scene at the hotel. But many of the key people that the government is going to rely upon when they're prosecuting him, they have pseudonyms. We don't know who they are and what evidence they'll provide.
Why has it taken so long for these charges to be laid against Sean Diddy Combs?
Well, until the video was seen by the world, and I think that led to a substantial amount of public outrage, which led to people starting to believe many of the rumors. I mean, it was a well-known rumor, and take that with a grain of salt, that P. Diddy was a powerful man who did untoward things. This is a case that has been building, and a number of people, I think, having seen that footage, stepped up and said, actually, something similar happened to me. giving the government and giving the state the power to bring the case that it ultimately bore.
Jahan, there are allegations we spoke about before where this video had been spoken about of this horrific violence against Casandra Ventura. We've seen that video now. There are allegations that Diddy filmed a lot of these, as we mentioned before, these freak-off parties. Do you think any of that video or any of that footage, first of all, the question is, where are those videos, and do you think they will ever come to light?
I don't know. I really don't know what can be said of it and what can be made of it. I think that a picture paints 1,000 words. And I think that for many people, you cannot ignore the reality of the savage assault that took place at the hotel room. This poor woman running for her life down a corridor, a man draped in a towel, punching her, kicking her, slapping her when she's on the ground. How does one avoid forming a very negative conclusion about an individual based on that?
There were also allegations that because he was so powerful within the music and greater entertainment industry, that there could be a number of high-profile names involved in these parties. Do you think that is true, and do you think we'll see any of that testimony provided in court during this case?
I think the prosecution are going to be very careful about how they run this, and I think it behooves them to do so. If this case becomes something larger than Ben-Hur, it becomes very difficult to secure the convictions that they're after. And fundamentally, I think they said it best in their opening statement that P. Diddy is a complicated man, but this is not a complicated case. They are saying that you have to believe the evidence of these witnesses, many who may not know each other, many who never met one another, but all say a very similar story. And when you take that to its conclusion, it becomes inescapable that beyond reasonable doubt, these things did happen, the way that the victims or the complainants say it is. But also, it's important to remember he's entitled to due process. And I may not like the man. I can go on record saying I struggle to like anyone who behaves the way that he does, but he is absolutely entitled to his day in court, and he's entitled to be found not guilty if there's any reasonable doubt in the jury's mind. And I think that for this man, it goes beyond freedom or not freedom. This is his legacy. He will be remembered by this trial, whatever happens.
And so the trial is set to last up to 8 weeks. Just a snapshot, it's kind of a lot of speculation at the moment, Jahan, but what are we set to see over the next couple of weeks with this trial?
I think that for anyone watching, it's very hard to predict what will happen 1 week to the next, but expect Cassie to give a lot more testimony and expect her to be very, very vigorously cross-examined, and expect there to be a lot of energy placed in discrediting her as a witness, because I think she's one of the linchpins of the prosecution case. And if the jury can be properly convinced that this person consented at the relevant time and then changed their mind, or that there was an ancillary purpose, like she received a large sum of money to settle a civil suit, I think then you're going to see a big weakness in the prosecution case. So that's the thing that I would, if anyone's watching at home or curious, that's what will be the big thing to happen in the next very short period of time.
Jahan, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That was criminal lawyer Jahan Kalantar. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss our episodes or our deep dive of the day. You can also follow us on our socials, on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search Listener Newsroom. That is spelled LISTNR. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.